My name is Jerry Boyer, and I was in the United States Navy. I joined up in the Navy before I was out of high school, left for the Navy when I was 17 and a half, was in for 3 years, almost 4 years. Went to San Diego for naval training, and from there went to Great Lakes Naval Training Center for 8 weeks of electricity and electronics training. From there I was shipped to Albuquerque, New Mexico for a few weeks of nuclear weapons training, for which they had to find a top secret clearance. And then from there, I didn't use that anymore, but I was sent to a ship, and I was on that ship, went on a cruise until 1962, when I decided not to re-enlist because Vietnam was starting up. I would have been, if I would have re-enlisted, would have been put on an aircraft carrier somewhere, but decided not to. After I was discharged, I took civil service exam for Naval Air Station in San Diego for firemen. Passed it, waited about 6 months, decided to go home. And after I was home, they called me that I had the job, and I turned it down because I was home. In '62, we went on called a Westpac cruise overseas. A lot of different ports. Probably one of the most interesting was Hiroshima, where they dropped the bomb, and this was only 15 years later. So there was still a lot of destruction, a lot of scarred people. The adults wouldn't talk to us. The little kids would run up to us, but the adults would not. Most of them, some of them had part of their faces gone, arms gone, legs gone, burnt real bad. That's hard to forget. One time we were doing exercises where they make a grid out of 100 square miles, and there's a submarine out there, and you have to go find him, pin him down, actually drop depth charges on him that go off 100 feet above him, and then they record hits and misses. The reason I remember this story is we found a submarine, we pinned him down, and hadn't started dropping hedgehogs, but we had him pinned down and announced that. And our submarine that we were supposed to find popped up 50 miles away and said, "I don't know who you have down there, but it's not us." At one point, we were in a typhoon where at 32 knots, which is about 38 miles an hour, we only made 2 miles in 2 days against the storm, taking 45-degree rolls. No one allowed outside the deck except the 2 lookouts who were fastened to the railing. Then we were sent, after we got back off our Westpac cruise, we were sent out one time to pin down an unidentified submarine, which they did back in those days, and see who it was and wait for him to come up for air and identify him. Well, we lost him clear up at Adak, Alaska on the Aleutian Islands, and we also had a Canadian destroyer with us looking for him. The reason we could track him and they sent us was we were the first ship that went through what they call FRAM, and we had a variable depth sonar put on the back, like a small submarine that would go down 200 feet and then trail and track. He never did come up because we think he was nuclear. Didn't have to. So then we refueled at the Aleutian Islands in Adak, Alaska. And on the way back down, this was in 1962, we stopped in at the Seattle Sea Fair, which was part of the World's Fair that year.
Rocket ride to Mars in the breathtaking U.S. Science Pavilion. See the fabulous city of tomorrow in the gigantic, wall-less, pillarless Coliseum. Have fun with the happy-go-lucky crowds.
Pack up your trouble.
For 6 wonderful months.
Pack up your family and head for the fair.
It's the big thrilling adventure of a lifetime.
When we got back in California, when you had an unidentified submarine, they'd want to know what it was and the people. And being we never got him up, it was announced over the radio a week or two later that that unidentified submarine was classified as a large school of fish. And radar room was right by the bridge. And you don't get a metallic ping off of the school of fish. But nobody knew that. It was a submarine. We just couldn't prove who it was. Another interesting time to me, our ship and 2 submarines surfaced side by side on each side of us, escorted the USS Kitty Hawk into the San Francisco harbor to be commissioned. And it had John F. Kennedy on board. And so we got to see him. He came on our ship. That was interesting. Our ship was also the flagship, which was, we had the Commodore on our, of Destroyer Division 72.
Did you get up close and personal with Kennedy at all?
No. Saw him in the distance on our ship, but we were at attention. Probably the biggest thing that happened while I was there, we got sent out on a ship blockade during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was almost like one of these North Korea deals where they're shooting missiles and wanting to cause problems, and Russia was bringing supplies into them, but it got shut down before it got started. So we spent a couple days turning ships around. They usually didn't argue with a destroyer, they turned around. But I was not in wartime, actually. Was after Korea, and when I got out of the service, there had only been about 8 or 10 people killed in Vietnam. And that was one of the reasons I decided not to continue.
What was life at sea like in the Navy?
Mostly work and sleep. Depending on the weather, if it was 120 degrees out there, we usually didn't do a lot. We'd work until 2 in the morning. At 10 in the morning, and then not till again at 9 at night or 10. And then we'd work during the night. Usually had enough lights, we could scrub decks, paint. Of course, everybody had different jobs. You have the radioman and signalman and engine crews. There's a lot of different parts of the ship. My job, I was a seaman, boatswain mate seaman. My main job at sea was to keep the crews working, painting decks, scrubbing decks, scraping. When we were in docked anywhere, here or overseas, my job was to run the captain's barge, take the captain and commodore wherever they needed to go. And it was kind of nice because if they would go home Friday night, I'd drop them off and they'd say, pick us up Monday morning. so I had the whole weekend. At sea, I kept my boat clean, and there were two of us that ran a boat, the one who steered it and the one who tied up at the docks, called the bow hook. But that was my job, and I enjoyed it. A lot of times on a Sunday, they would stop the ship and let people swim for an hour with a rifleman up there for sharks, which was fun.
Did you ever have any close encounters with sharks?
Not sharks, but we did, one story I forgot to tell. One day we hit an 80-foot whale, cut him right in half, and within half an hour there were thousands of sharks there. Knocked everyone off their feet. And they estimated him, I don't know how many thousand ton, 80 feet long.
Did you ever have any kind of tense moments?
Actually, we did. Another story I forgot, when we came out of the channel at Hiroshima, we were just out of the channel and I was on deck. I was on the bridge. I had to pipe orders and stuff. And all of a sudden, one new lookout, which we had picked up 2 recruits, they were on lookout, and one of them reported a torpedo coming at us. And the captain said, "Is that the new guy out there?" I said, "Yeah." Said, "It's probably a porpoise." I just happened to walk out on the wing, and here was a torpedo coming. And captain made right hard rudder and whatever, and it went by us. And pretty soon a Japanese submarine popped up. And his message was, if I remember right, was holding target practice on UDT boat, did not see you, so sorry. And our captain signaled back with the lights, of course, the signal lights. Better luck next time. But that was kind of a tense moment. And it was a live torpedo because it blew up the ship that he was.
So he was right on target then. Just
He
didn't know you were in the way.
No. Oh, yes, I was in Pearl Harbor. Had several 2-man submarines, Japanese submarines, on display there that they found in the harbor. And you could still see all the ships sunk, and that was kind of a downer for me. Got to go swimming in Waikiki Beach, and that's when there were only 2 hotels there.
I suspect that's not true anymore.
No.
By a long shot.
No, it's a whole city now. There were a lot of interesting moments. Some of the bars they had in Hong Kong, they put up bars that just had cardboard walls, and people would walk right through them. And there might be a bar there one day and you go back the next and it's not there, it's gone.
What activities were available on shore leave?
Usually not a lot, just go see the cities or wherever you were at. Like Hong Kong, you could go up in a trolley up to the top, and then right down below you was mainland China you could see. One thing I did do on my ship, I was pretty good sized kid at that time, and I joined the fleet weightlifting team. We'd lift against other ships, same size as ours. That was interesting. Other activities, you played cards on the ship, or always had a guitar player or 2 We actually had a nephew of Johnny Cash that was on my ship, and he would play every day. Another thing, there was no regular barber. You were assigned a week as a barber. And then the next week was somebody else was the barber. So you might get a good haircut and you might not get one at all. The food was good. You always had mess duty at least once every couple months.
Did you have to peel potatoes?
We actually had a big drum with just like sandpaper on the inside, and you put water and potatoes in and it turned, and it would. We had an ensign ball, and we called him 8 Ball. He was always playing jokes. And I was on the bridge April 1 at night, and he told me to pipe reveille at 1 in the morning. And people don't look at their watches. When reveille comes, they get up, get dressed, go get in the chow line outside and stand there and wait till the door opens. And so here at 1 in the morning, everybody's up there waiting for chow, and then he has me pipe April Fools. So those things went on.
Shenanigans?
Yeah. Another story, when we hit that whale, and about a week later, another whale tried to go under and just hit the bottom of the ship. Didn't hurt him that much. He kept going, but this ensign ball he painted, during wartime, if you sink a submarine, you paint that submarine on the wall. Well, he had 2 whales painted up there. So there were good times too. I was up 3 times I took 3rd class. In those days it was hard to get upgraded. During Vietnam War, some of them came out of there 6 grades higher, but.
Can you list all the countries you visited?
I was in Pearl Harbor, Subic Bay, Yokosuka, Sasebo, Japan, Kobe, Japan, Hiroshima, Buckner Bay. That's a story in itself. That's in the Philippines. Fueling station. They have 2 villages there called Village Number 1 and Village Number 2. And the VD rate was 98%. So nobody went ashore. Okinawa, I was in Okinawa, and a place called Beipu, Japan, Hong Kong. Even in that storm, people were throwing up. Even the Commodore was throwing up. He had a 5-gallon bucket there. Didn't really bother me. I just kept busy, You can imagine our ship would go up 50 feet, 50-foot swells. If you can imagine a 50-foot swell, our ship would float over them, where we were escorting an aircraft carrier, and sometimes you could see under him in the middle. It was that, and they're 1,000, 1,500 feet long, so you'd have 2 swells, and he'd be on both of them. It was tough. You couldn't go with the storm; you had to go into it. Destroyers, fastest thing on the water at that time, about 40 mile an hour wide open, 35 knots.
You were to, in that kind of a storm, if you were to attempt to turn around or something, you would get blown over sideways. You have to go straight into the storm.
Straight into it, because we took 45-degree rolls, which is on your side. But you have to go over almost 60 degrees before it'll not come back. But we took a couple of 45s, Rest were all 35, 40. And then, say this is a passageway, you would walk here. Because your ship would be like this, and you'd be walking on the wall. It was tough. There are some things on here that are interesting, like statistical information. How much fuel we used.
Oh, sure, yeah.
How many Cokes we drank on our cruise. 69,000 of them. How much toilet paper? 2,000 rolls. How many haircuts were given? How many cigarettes were smoked? 912,000 packs.
Well, that was certainly a little more common back then.
Yeah.